Francisco and Juliana were about to fail science studies, Professor Harry did not forgive them for being Christians. For not believing in the Big Bang Theory, they would get a 0. For not believing in evolution, 0. For contradicting the age of the Earth, 0. For not agreeing with genetic manipulation, 0. The professor felt he could take away the face of these two teenagers, so he challenged them to do an apology of their faith. What is an apologia? In the Greek legal system, the accusation was called a categoria, and the accused would defend himself against that accusation with an apologia, which was a speech or explanation to address the charges. And who would be the jury? The classmates. If they convinced the majority of their classmates, they would pass the subject. If not, they would fail science studies. When they got home, they told their parents about the situation.
Professor Harry asked us to give an apology of our faith.
How will we be able to show them that God is real?
After praying, Dad opened his Bible to John 20:30-31, where the apostle explains the purpose of his book.
Listen up, children. Jesus also did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these were written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through him.
Did you notice? There are two reasons, which means that the book of John has a double purpose. The first is an apologetic one, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And the second is an evangelistic one, that believing you may have life through him. They took a room in the house, hung up a sign that read John's Project, and began to prepare for the challenge of their lives, the apologetics of their faith. Sabbath School LIKE presents the series, The Gospel of John. Lesson 1, Signals that Show the Way. In John 20:30-31, one of the most predominant words in the book shows up, signs. What are these signs? Miracles. Why didn't John simply call them miracles? Because for John, they were more than miracles. They were proof or evidences that demonstrated the divinity of Christ. Listen up. All apologetics is based on evidence. So John organized his gospel around 7 signs that prove the true identity of Jesus. This week, we will study the first 3 signs in the book. So this week's question is, what are the first signs that Jesus did that prove his divinity? First, he turned water into wine. John 1 narrates the call of the first 5 disciples, John, Andrew, Peter, Philip, and Nathanael. When Philip told Nathanael that he had found the Messiah, he said something very interesting.
Nathanael, my friend, we have found him of whom Moses and the prophets wrote, Jesus, the son of Joseph, from Nazareth.
Moses? Had Moses written about Jesus? Yes. In Deuteronomy 18:15, Moses wrote, "The Lord, your God, will raise up for you a prophet from among you, from among your brothers, like me. You will hear him." Who was he talking about? The Messiah, and the disciples knew it. A few days after calling his first disciples, Jesus left Bethesda on the other side of the Jordan, where John the Baptist was baptizing, and traveled about 105 kilometers to Cana in Galilee, where a wedding was being held, to which Jesus and his disciples were invited. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there, and when the wine had run out, Mary said to those who were serving,
"Do whatever he tells you."
Jesus told them to fill 6 jars with water. Then he told them to draw some and take it to the steward of the banquet. And when the steward tasted the water, it was no longer water. Jesus had turned it into the best wine. Do you remember that one of the miracles God did through Moses in Egypt had to do with the transformation of water?
Yes! He turned the waters of the Nile River into blood.
And now Jesus happens to be turning water into wine.
Did you notice that? It dawned on the disciples. The miracle of Jesus reminded them of the miracle of Moses, who referred to the Messiah as a prophet like himself, and they noticed that the jars used in the miracle had been used for purification in Jewish rituals, further linking the miracle to biblical themes of salvation. The evidence was meaningful. John calls this miracle the first of the signs, and this apologetic evidence fulfilled its evangelistic purpose. Thus, he, Jesus, revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Second, he healed an officer's child. The second of the signs or evidences recorded by John in his Gospel appears in chapter 4. About a year after turning water into wine, Jesus returns to the same place, Cana of Galilee, and a royal official whose son was ill in Capernaum pleaded with him to come and heal his son who was about to die. Jesus' initial response seems harsh.
You all will never believe unless you see signs and wonders.
Why did Jesus speak to him in this way? That's simple. Jesus read his heart and saw that he had resolved that if Jesus healed his son, he would believe in him, and if he didn't, he would not believe. But now he discovers something unexpected. Jesus can read hearts. A quick question. Did the miracles alone prove that Jesus was the Messiah?
No. The magicians of Egypt also did supernatural things.
And Revelation says that the devil also does miraculous signs.
That's right, but the only one who can read hearts is God. Did you notice? Before doing the miracle, Jesus was already giving signs of being the Son of God. That's why in the whole book of John the word miracle does not appear, while sign or signals appear 18 times. Why? Because for John, the evidence was not only in the miracle, but in the signs surrounding the miracle. In the year that had passed by since the wedding at Cana, Jesus had performed many other miracles, but John did not want to highlight merely regular shows, but evidence. The royal official pleaded with Jesus again, but this second plea was full of faith.
Go, your son lives.
The man believed so firmly that he did not hurry home, but as evidence of his faith in Jesus, he came home the next day and found that his son had been healed the day before, just as Jesus had spoken those words. This second sign, as John calls it, also served its purpose, for he says of the official that he and his whole household believed. And third, the Bethesda miracle. The third sign reported by John took place at the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem. It was believed that an angel stirred the water, and the first sick person to jump in was cured.
It was like a speed competition.
Imagine how many people were there.
And among them was a paralytic who had been sick for 38 years. Jesus saw him and approached him.
Do you want to be healed?
The man vented all his frustration with Jesus. He had no one to take him in, and someone always came down first. Then he heard the words of his life.
Arise, take up your bed, and walk.
Instantly the man was healed, took up his bed, and walked. Later, Jesus found him in the temple and told him to sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon him. Did you notice? Jesus again saw what no one else could see. This man's sickness was because of his sins, and the fact that Jesus knew it was another sign of his divinity. But no matter how clear the evidence is, there are always people who choose not to believe. Jesus had healed this man on the Sabbath and had also commanded him to carry his bed on the Sabbath. The Jewish leaders launched their accusation, and Jesus responded with a masterful apology. He explained to them that his authority comes from the Father, and that with that authority he can even raise the dead. He cited 4 witnesses who confirmed his divinity: John the Baptist, the miracles he performed, the Father, and the Scriptures. And he showed them that by not believing in him, the writings of Moses accused them. An unquestionable apology. But did they believe? No, now they persecuted him and tried to kill him. The children already had their first 3 pieces of evidence, but they understood that no matter how clear their proofs were and no matter how honorable their apologia was, there would always be people who would close their eyes and not see or believe. What would happen? Would they definitely fail the subject, or would they manage to convince the majority of their classmates? Then Dad reminded them that the purpose was not only an apologetic one, but an evangelistic one, and that for just one of their peers to believe and find life in Christ, the apologia would have been worth it. What about you? Have you understood the dual purpose of John's Gospel? Never forget that these things were written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through him. Sabbath School LIKE Plus invites you to continue studying the series, The Gospel of John. Subscribe now to the new channel and don't miss anything.